Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to all, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's truly a pleasure to bring together colleagues working across research, policy, and practice, and all of whom are engaged in different ways with the question of how agri-food innovations can reach scale more effectively. And today's session is intended to be a space for shared reflection and exchange. We will begin by briefly introducing our coalition, the Scaling Coalition, as in what this coalition is, and more importantly, what it is not. We have allocated about 5 minutes for that, and we think it is very important to discuss this particular point. Because what it is, we know that, but what it is not, because we are looking at ourselves not exactly as a funding platform, but not as exactly as an institutional layer, but rather as a space for coordination and collective problem solving. And then we will spend about 5 minutes to discuss some of the priority scaling challenges that many of us encounter in our day-to-day work as well. These includes issues of fragmentation, misalignment across sectors, and gaps in translating innovations, etc. After that, we will introduce the concept of solution groups, which are central to how the coalition operates. And we are going to allocate about 10 minutes for this discussion. And these are going to be very focused, action-oriented groups, which that bring together interested partners to work on specific bottlenecks and co-developed kind of practical approaches for scaling solution. Then we will also briefly touch upon the governance structure to give us a sense of how coalition is organized and how different partners like CGIAR, FOA, Gates Foundation, GIZ, and World Bank Group is engaged within this framework. And we have allocated about 5 minutes for that. And then we want to spend about 15 minutes to focus on a call to action. Here we hope to explore how each of you might engage with the coalition, whether by joining existing solution group or contributing to our ongoing efforts or helping shape new areas of collaboration. That is also welcome. And finally, we will open the floor for a 10-minute long question and answer session before we close. And we hope this session provides not just information, but also an opportunity to think creatively and collectively and critically about how we can move from individual isolated efforts to collaborated and consolidated approaches of scaling. Again, I welcome you all. And with this, I hand over to my colleague, Lorraine Ronchi. Over to you, Lorraine.
Thank you very much. My name is Lorraine Ronchi. I am the global lead for scaling science, knowledge, and innovation at the World Bank Group. And I'm going to kick us off with a brief introduction to what the Scaling Coalition is, and as our moderator has said, what it is not, and how it all got started. So everyone signing up for a webinar such as this has probably already had the thought that kicked this all off. And that thought is, many things need to come together if a solution or an innovation is to get to scale, and over different points of time. Science alone is not enough. Money alone is not enough. And even necessity alone is not enough. So the logical conclusion of these observations is that no single entity interested in scaling solutions can actually solve every scaling challenge on their own. So while many of us appreciate that, the question was, what are we going to do about it? While the scaling of specific solutions and specific geographies would be unique, there are some pretty big common bottlenecks that all of us who are interested in scaling solutions face. This became apparent when teams from 4 different organizations happened to be exchanging on scaling in the CGIAR Scaling Week of 2024. The outcome of these conversations became the Scaling Coalition. So it's known that there are interested groups and committed scalers out there. Many of you are included in that group. And of course, we knew of a large existing collective of folks interested in scaling. There was no need to form another scaling community of practice. What we needed was like a workspace or an action space, a way to unite partners to globally address challenges that we may collectively experience and that no single organization could address alone. Okay, so that's the basic sort of concept. So what does the Scaling Coalition actually do? So we know about the scaling ecosystem. right? I'm like, sometimes I wonder if the biologists have quite forgiven the social scientists for their enthusiastic takeover of the term ecosystem. But here it is again, ladies and gentlemen. There are a lot of things, as I noted earlier, and that as my colleagues will expand on, that need to come together in order to scale. So, like other groups, the Scaling Coalition wants to see a system change, right? A global scaling ecosystem to see agri-food innovation specifically reach those who need it the most, which are smallholder farmers. So the Scaling Coalition co-creates solutions to these collective challenges. Like what kind of collective challenge? We're going to see a couple of examples today to sort of illustrate what I mean by that. And it does it by connecting partners, by providing them a space to work together, and to do all of this with a kind of light mechanism, a light mechanism whose role is identify, connect, work together, get the things out there. What it is not, what the Scaling Coalition does not do is solve specific innovation scaling problems for specific individual projects or organizations, right? So it's not like we have this, we'd like it to scale. Could the Scaling Coalition sort of show us how that's done? There are many experts who've dialed into this call, actually, who are, expert at that, and that's what they do. That's not what the Scaling Coalition does. It doesn't run a funding platform, okay? It doesn't operate or fund unilateral or bilateral scaling projects. And it does not provide a new community of practice or an exclusive, closed, or a fixed community. No, because the idea is to collectively identify and then get the folks who may have something on a solution set to contribute together. It is a dynamic group. So with that, I would like to call on my colleague, Mark, to say a little bit more about that ecosystem. And the rest of our time together is really just to illustrate in action what the Scaling Coalition hopes to do and what it can do. Mark, over to you.
Thanks so much, Lorraine, for the introduction to the Scaling Coalition. And as Lorraine mentioned, late 2024, this group of 5 organizations came together and realized that we need to work together in a more integrated, holistic way if we really want change to be happening. Early 2025, these 5 organizations met to have initial discussions about what a framework for the Scaling Coalition could look like. And we started by an initial mapping of ecosystem functions for scaling. And you can see this pie diagram on your screen, and I'll just highlight a few things that are important for scaling to happen. So I think we all acknowledge that scaling is about institutional reform. Scaling is about having certain kind of skills, capacities, and the ability to share those. Scaling is very much about networks and partnerships and building those and maintaining those. Scaling is very much about having a portfolio of innovations, maybe across different levels of readiness that you could actually deploy. It is about science, it's about learning, it's about strategizing, and etc. So we came up with these 13 ecosystem functions, which are definitely not carved in stone, but provided a starting point for us to work from. And we want to use that a little bit as a first entry point to launch a live poll to which you can contribute. And the question here that we are asking is, what are your priority scaling challenges? And please feel free to go beyond the 13 that we listed in the pie chart, but at an organizational level or as an individual in an organization, like what are the priority scaling challenges that you are dealing with on a day-to-day basis and that you would like to collaborate with others on to actually solve? So the word cloud is starting to get visible for me. I see scaling, obviously, often mentioned. I see the institutional reform, value chain, scaling strategies, knowledge about scaling, business models, considerations on up and down scaling or up and downstream, demand and capacity. So how do we make sure that what is scaled meets a certain kind of demand? Dealing with politics, scaling can be very political. In many cases, we are trying to transform systems in which people have invested and in which people are comfortable with. Continuity of funding, I see. let's see, if investment packages, your chain considerations, donors, country programs, etc., etc. So I think, like, in a nutshell, like, some are overlapping with the elements that were already identified on the slide, on the pie chart. And there's also several new issues that are being mentioned, which is very good, and we'll tell you later why that is a good thing. So I think we'll continue, and we'll go to the next slide. Just to give you an idea, we did a similar kind of mapping in 2025. And we ended up with 2 areas where the 4 or 5 founding members of the Scaling Coalition felt that there was opportunities for collaboration. So the first one was on innovation profiles and inventories. And I'll dive a little bit deeper, but what we felt there was that there's a lot of good knowledge and information that on innovation, but also on scaling context, on demand, etc. But these information sits with different kinds of organizations, not necessarily able to speak to one another. And 3 organizations, World Bank, FAO, and CGIAR, decided to collaborate on that. So we basically formed a solution group, a subset of Scaling Coalition members that decided, yeah, we want to work on this together. There's a second solution group on capacity sharing, and I'll also provide a little bit more detail later, that consists of FAO, GIZ, and also CGIAR, that are working on exchanging tools for capacity sharing and experiences. Now, I want to give a little bit more of information on what these solution groups actually are. So the solution groups are the operational engine of the Scaling Coalition. So that is really the space where members of the coalition meet and work together to solve specific challenges that cut across organizational boundaries. So usually they're very focused. We work like in 6-month cycles where we have very clear objectives and outputs. As I said, they tackle a specific collective scaling challenges, and it's not a talk shop. It is very clear participation levels with transparent expectation about who does what, by when, in what manner. So it's a platform for collaboration and for action, not just for exchange and for learning. To give you a little bit more of an idea of how these groups work, on the data interoperability, it was especially World Bank Group saying, hey, we actually have an appetite for innovation data that sits with CGIAR and with FAO, but we find that there's no easy access to this kind of information because these databases are somehow scattered, they don't speak to one another, and we would love to have access in a more coordinated way. So we started this journey with the 3 organizations to first understand like what data and tools are out there to support scaling, how to best translate, exchange, and support the use of that kind of information at the sectoral level. And then we developed what we call a Rosetta Stone, basically, which is an interpretation mechanism between different kinds of organization, innovation, and scaling databases to exchange better data and information. And currently, this group, as I already said, has World Bank, FAO, and CGIAR representation. We do workshops, we have action plans, we follow up. Each of the members did interviews, focus group discussions within the organizational boundaries, and this is how we are collaborating on solving this matter. The other solution group is on capacity sharing. The challenge that was guiding that group was that existing capacity sharing tools, approaches, and efforts are rich but fragmented. And there is a lot of organizations who are doing the same thing because they are not aware of existing capacity development and capacity sharing tools and approaches. And developing an inventory of that and trying to see like, hey, where are the overlaps? Who's focusing most on demand intelligence? Who is focusing on scaling strategies? Who's following on innovation, bundling, packaging, trying to see like, okay, where is there sufficient overlap? What can we learn from one another? But also, where are some of the gaps in the sense of tools, and maybe we can respond to that and work on closing some of these gaps together. So this group also, there's been a workshop, there's been an inventory. Each of the organizational representatives did inventories on tools and approaches within their organizations and tried to bring that together. And the objective is to have a toolkit on scaling capacity sharing tools and approaches. So with these two, showing these two groups gives you a little bit of an idea of how the coalition works, what kind of mechanisms, and what you can expect if you decide to join one of these groups or establish a new group. And with that, I'm handing over to Michael to speak a little bit about the membership and engagement model.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to run us through the governance and engagement model that we have come up with. You can see here the outer circle, that is the scaling community of practice, the agriculture chapter, and those blue dots in the left, they stand for the SCOP members. So this is sort of a reservoir of members who would then eventually be able to engage with the scaling coalition in the form of solution groups. So the scaling coalition also has sort of a relationship with the SCOP through co-chairing. Scaling coalition provides a co-chair to the group, and therefore there is a certain amount of relationship and interaction already. So now coming to the solution groups, Mark has already explained a little bit about the solution groups and has given us 2 examples of already existing solution groups. So the idea is that these solution groups form around a certain topic or a challenge or a problem that we want to address in order to facilitate better and more powerful scaling. A solution group would normally not be too large. I mean, we've been discussing that internally, and we felt like if a solution group would entail or comprise of, let's say 15, 20 members or so, it would be very difficult to manage it. So it would be a few members who are very committed, who are capable of sort of providing significant input into a solution group and who have a comparative advantage to work on that particular problem they are addressing. We believe that a solution group member should attend at least 50% of the solution group meetings and contributes expertise time like in the range of 3 to 6 days per year. That is just to show you, that there is a certain level of commitment required to be able or to be within the solution group. So then we have focal points. These focal points are nominated by solution groups. They interact with the advisory committee. So these focal groups are responsible for certain activities like reporting to the advisory committee and convening meetings and managing outputs, etc. So the advisory committee at the moment consists of the founding members of the Scaling Coalition. Advisory committee would provide strategic guidance and review proposals for the formation of new solution groups. And then we have a secretariat and communication functions that are supporting the Scaling Coalition. And then, of course, there would be sort of a relationship and interaction between the Scaling Coalition and the members of the SCOP. The results of the solution groups will be disseminated to the members of SCOP, so for further use by them. So that will make available everything that has been developed. And of course, there will be a consultative process also into the other direction towards the Scaling Coalition. So the Scaling Coalition is very much sort of a temporary kind of entity, with solution groups that are forming for certain topics, working on these topics. Once that has been accomplished, the solution group will dissolve. Members would be basically moving back to the left side into the reservoir group, and new solution groups would be formed. So some general principles maybe on the coalition governance. The governance model is light and pragmatic. So we are not employing people. We don't have a budget. You know, it's just contributions by participating organizations. It is very much commitment based and still evolving. So this, what I've just presented, the previous slide, is a proposal, something that we worked out as the current founding members. However, it's very much work in progress. And of course, once we get to implement this model, we will see where we need to adjust and adapt to maybe needs that are coming up. It's important to understand that we see this as an organizational representation. So if an individual person is maybe individually or personally interested in certain topics, that is not sufficient. You should be able to represent your organization. So it's an organizational representation in, for example, a solution group. The advisory committee at the moment comprises the founding members, but we see that we would enlarge that to a total of maybe 7 to 10 members. And the secretariat currently is also provided by the founding members. So we have 2 people working or sort of achieving the secretariat functions. The full governance terms of reference are available and on request. So if you are interested in more details, then of course we can provide you with these details. So how do you get involved in this? So we have 2 options. One is to join an existing solution group. Mark just presented the 2 solution groups that are already up and running and working. So the one on data interoperability and capacity sharing, and we have provided you with names you can contact. These are focal points and leads. And so if you are interested to learn more about these solution groups and you think you could be an organization who could considerably contribute to these solution groups, then feel free to contact those contact persons. You can also fill an online form, which is available on the website. And importantly, of course, is to confirm your commitment that you can be an active member and contribute significantly to the objectives of the solution group. Option 2 is to propose a new solution group. So you can identify collective scaling challenges, team up with others to propose a solution group. Again, a proposal form is available on the website. The advisory committee will review the proposal. So the next round we are proposing will be by mid-May. And then the solution groups would operate for about 6 months in circles, which means that the solution group would stay in the composition of organizations as it is, not to disrupt too much. After 6 months, you can review, maybe somebody has to drop out, or there's maybe new organizations coming up that would be interested in joining. So there's a certain flexibility there, but also a stability for a certain number of months, which is 6 months here. And again, commitment for focal point and the commitment in terms of working days per year, which is an estimate, of course, and depends very much on the subject or the topic that the solution group will address. Okay, with this one, I'll hand back over to Gabi, I think, for the second poll.
I just launched the poll just now. This is a 4-part question. As you move through the different questions, there should be an arrow key on your screen to move forward to the next question. 3 of them are multiple choice, so that's self-explanatory. And the last one is a word cloud, where if you are interested in establishing a new solution group, to please describe it in 1 or 2 words. And so we'll let everybody have some time now to answer all of those 4 questions, and I will pass it over to Esther.
To everyone who may not know who I am, my name is Esther Kihoro. I work with CGIAR based at the International Livestock Research Institute. I also double up as a co-chair of the Agriculture, Rural Development and Social Enterprises Working Group of the Scaling Community of Practice. I'm happy to be with you all here today. So I think, Gabby, from my end, I see 7 responses. So let's give it a minute. So feel free to click on the screen and respond to the questions. So basically, to the first question, what I see here is, would you be interested in joining an existing solution group? I see around 45% responses are yes. And to the second question, which solution groups are you interested in joining? I see quite some high responses on capacity sharing. I think that's where most people are interested in, around 33% of the responses. And then we have some responses on data interoperability. So people who would want to join that group. In terms of, would you be interested in establishing a new solution group? I think this is where we have 38% saying yes, they would like to establish a new solution group. If you're interested in establishing a new solution group, please describe what solution group you'd want to form. I see some responses on the science. Okay, science research, a lot of responses there. Some want to join a solution group on financial flows. Yeah. Evidence and success. So I would want to hear a little bit about a little bit on the evidence and success. Is this like impact assessments only, or it's also really about also the science and learning? Some would want to form solution groups on working with governments, public extension, and sustainable innovation scaling. So the sustainability aspect there. I see also some responses on business models and also responses on just solution groups on agriculture or sustainable agriculture. So let me see if there are any more responses coming in. If not, I'm happy to also transition us a bit onto the question and answer session. So for those who have a question either on the presentation or on how to engage, please feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand. If you're able to raise your hand, Gabby will unmute you and you can be able to present the question. Also, you can drop your questions here on the chat and we can respond to them. I see Lorraine provided a nice overview of how the Scaling Coalition came about. I think all the presenters are now on screen, just in case we have any question on chat and they are able to respond. And then we got a nice overview from Mark on the key priorities, scaling challenges, and then really what are the solution groups that are already there and how they're functioning. And Michael provided the membership model and governance, what would be needed from us. So Dakmawi, if you're already unmuted, please feel free to ask your question.
Yes, thanks everyone. Yeah, I have just a simple question on and where and how some of the outputs or recommendations of the coalition will be accessed.
Thanks, Dakmawi. Anyone who wants to respond to this?
I can respond, Esther, if you want.
Please.
Yeah. So in principle, the dissemination channel is the Scaling Community of Practice. That's our primary group of people that we would love to engage on progress being made in the solution groups and outputs and solutions that come out of that. I think also in the chat we've shared the Scaling Coalition website. So at the moment it's very bare bone. That's intentional. But I think also at some point we'll include key outputs and deliverables from the coalition on the website as well. So that's on the dissemination of key outputs. I can also take the question by Dana Esther, if you allow me in the chat, and then I'll maybe hand over to Michael or Lorraine for some of the other questions in the chat. But so the question was, I am a grantee working for an organization in scaling, and that organization, if that organization would give me permission, could I represent that organization on a working group? I think the answer is yes. As Michael mentioned in his slide, like we are very much interested in organizational participation, because the spirit of the Scaling Coalition is to solve problems that single organizations cannot solve. But we are definitely looking for representatives of that organization who are scaling fanatics. So people who are really fanatic about solving this problem in a good way. But have organizational backbone and representation, because we feel that would help us to institutionalize some of these solutions and really make sure that they make an impact. So I think the long and short, yes, then are very, very welcome to join with your organizational representation. With that, let me hand over to Michael or Lorraine for some of the other questions in the chat.
I think we have a hand up as well.
Okay, this is Johannes Lin. I'm the co-chair of the Scaling Community Practice, and I have a question, but before I raise my question, I want to thank you all in the coalition for doing what you're doing, because it's really I think a logical kind of follow-on to the idea of the Scaling Community Practice, and you're taking it a level higher or a level deeper, depending on how you look at it. And I wish you really the best of success, because I think it's a terrific initiative. And we in the Scaling Community Practice are here to help you, to support you, and make it work. So my question is this. So the solution groups, I think understandably, and I think appropriately, are kind of limiting, at least initially, limited to 6 months work. My question is, okay, so 6 months are done, and you said there's a possibility for continuing. But how do we, since we know a lot of the issues that these solution groups like to address are kind of, will probably take longer term engagement, or at least will take, after the initial work has been done, will take some monitoring, whether a follow-up of some kind, whether or not actually the action that was decided on or was instigated by the solution group leads to anything at all. So my question is, will the Secretariat or the coalition, or who will kind of take stock of what the solution groups have come up with, and whether there's some follow-up, so that we don't have the usual problem of pilots to nowhere, which is a bit of a risk here, I see. And I'm sure you've thought about this. So if you can address that risk, perhaps, can you share it with us? Thank you.
Please go ahead, Michael, and maybe also address the governance question as you respond to this one.
Yes, maybe Johannes, and maybe Lorraine can also add to this, but I just want to say that maybe I was misunderstood. It's not like a solution group would exist for 6 months and then stop working, or maybe, be extended or so. It was more like a solution group should sort of remain in its sort of composition of organizations for 6 months in order to not disrupt the work too much, so we don't have new organizations coming in, joining, others dropping out, back and forth and so on, but to have some stability for a period of 6 months, and then open it up maybe after 6 months, after some milestones have been reached or so, open it up maybe for new organizations, or certain organizations would then like to drop out. So that was the idea of the 6 months. And to the other part of your question, maybe Lorraine, you could answer that one. I also wanted to address another 2 questions. One was already answered by Mark to a large degree. That is how the outputs would be shared amongst the members or the wider community of organizations interested in scaling. I think that depends a little bit on the type of solution or the problem that has been addressed. But I could, for example, also imagine, beyond just presenting things on our website or making available the working outputs of the solution groups, maybe also have certain events on conferences or public events, or within the scaling community of practice, have events and webinars and so on where these results and outputs of solution groups would be presented and made available, because that's the whole idea. We want to make these things available to everybody who is interested in scaling and wants to apply those solutions that have been developed. There was one question in the chat on projected outcomes of the solution groups. I think, again, that is something that depends on the topic or on the certain issue that will be addressed. I think it is up to the solution groups when they submit a proposal, to come up with the outcomes they want to achieve, and sort of commit to that and formulate that clearly. And this is then something, that they work towards, and that would be hopefully then be available for a broader audience. Maybe Lorraine, over to you with this.
Yeah, that was related, Johannes, your question about sort of monitoring what happens, the so what after a solutions group comes up with something is related also to Julie Howard's question that Michael started to touch upon about, like, what does success look like? What's the outcome? Similar to what Michael was saying, it's not so much the launch of a pilot solution, but there's an active problem that a group has in common. And their job is to brainstorm and work out solutions and present them back to us. So Julie, what does an outcome look like? If the problem is, for example, how do ministries of agriculture easily access economic and financial data and scientific evidence around a scale-ready innovation without accessing 40 different databases? And a group gets together and they discuss that. Then what success looks like is that a Ministry of Agriculture is able to access the data they need to scale at much lower transaction cost. Then to lead to to Johannes's question, if that arose as a problem, it's because people were interested in an answer. And like Michael was saying, I think this is a dynamic group which relies on the group members to move things forward. So I would imagine that those solutions would then be put in place by those who were interested or who raised it as a problem in the first place. But I understand Johannes's question to be that perhaps the Secretariat should have a more explicit role in tracking those, right? So we will know through the form that was just circulated, who all raised their hands about this. There will be the Scaling Community of Practice is our host group, and many thanks to you and the entire team, Johannes, for that. So we communicate that backwards, and I think you're right, that there probably needs to be more explicit mention of at least tracking where it happened, who's implementing the solution, and what their experience is. But the information needs to come from those that are implementing it. Todd, this is related to your question also. If somebody from Gates is online, they can answer also. Anybody in this webinar, anybody in the Scaling Community of Practice, anybody with an interest is allowed to put themselves forward in the way that was described by Mark and Michael. It's what I meant maybe in my earliest comment when I opened today. This isn't a fixed group. It's not because like 4 or 5 organizations sort of put up the skeletal architecture that's the leadership body ad infinitum. It's a dynamic group of people who have a problem to solve and a willingness to try to work together to solve it. Over.
Thanks, Lorraine. Would you want to speak a little bit about the organizational archetypes? So also in terms of if anyone wants to join, what are the various mechanisms of doing that?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, sure. I think though we covered that in the presentation. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the chat to make sure that I'm answering the question that you're wanting me to answer, Esther. I mean, in the original kind of discussion group, you had archetypes like big development multilateral partners, a bilateral partner, a science or research organization, technical assistance organization. But we're looking also for many, what with the bank we would call client countries. Many ministries of agriculture, local NARS are interested in this as well. Regional organizations like CORAF have already expressed their interest. So this is why the openness of the Scaling Community of Practice to to host, to be that latent group that Michael described, is so important because it's inclusive of multiple archetypes. The important thing is that we have a problem in common that is standing in our way to scaling innovations for smallholders. And we have something to say about the solution, or we don't, but we're ready to hear about it.
Yeah, thanks, Lorraine. Thanks, Lorraine. I'll pass on now to Mark. I see a few questions that you would want to respond to. Feel free to take them and yeah.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being so engaging in the chat. There's a lot of there's a question, for example, on like if we work on interoperability, would that be open source or not? In principle, so far we've been working around a specific use case and a specific client in mind, who would be accessing this innovation data. But in essence, this is something we determine together. If like the use case that Lorraine describes, like there's a Ministry of Agriculture in Senegal who currently, has to go through paper folders and, visit 10 different databases to get an idea on what like different organizations are working on in terms of innovation in his country or her country. Then if our use case is like, let's make life easier for those kinds of users, then that is what we can work towards. And whether that then needs to be open source or whether we have a specific engagement process with the Ministry of Agriculture in Senegal, like that, it depends a little bit, like on what we, what we determine success looks like. So I think in essence, that like everything is possible. There is no strict ideas around like everything needs to be open and public, or we can also work on specific solutions for specific users. This is something we can determine together. Thanks also, Victor, for reaching out, to other participants. I think this is a little bit the spirit. Somebody is dropping something. Hey, we have an issue here. Can we work together on this? So this is very much in the spirit of the coalition, and maybe also like this is already on the last slide, but after this webinar, we will also share the list of participants. We'll also dig up some information about like who is interested in forming a new solution group, what are some of the topics, so that we can potentially also do some matchmaking already and follow up with you on that. Are there any other things, Esther, that you see in the chat that I could respond to, or perhaps Lorraine or Michael?
At the moment, no. You seem to have covered all the questions pretty well. I will encourage everyone.
There's one question actually on criteria that the advisory committee is will look for when considering a new solution group proposal. Maybe that's a good point. So what we are very, very much looking into is like, is this genuinely a problem that multiple organizations face and are willing to collaborate on? Because we mentioned we really focused on not solving a specific project, program, or organizational solutions, but really tackling them at the sectoral level. So that's one of the things. Like, do you bring a strong consortium that is motivated and has a clear idea of like how is this going to help us work better, faster, cheaper, and so forth. And I think the other one is the commitment. So we said like this is really about developing solutions. It's not just a talk shop or an interesting networking platform. Like most of the solution groups and the people in it so far, they are really action oriented and really want to take the cow by the horns and make it happen. So I think some of these things will definitely be very important for assessing the new solution group proposal. Probably also like, are they distinct enough from what's already going on? But currently we have two quite distinct solution groups. So I think that would be pretty clear to people.
Thanks, Mark. One more for you. Is TAT already part of the data interoperability solution group?
Yeah, I think that one definitely is for me. So TAT is the transformation of or technologies for African agricultural transformation. It's a African Development Bank funded program implemented. It's not just African Development Bank, it's also Gates funded, implemented by CGIAR, by IITA. So as CGIAR is represented as an organization, that is very much part of the data interoperability work. But if there are specific colleagues from the TAT program who want to join, then they are more than welcome to let us know. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. I see there are no other hands raised. Let me give it a moment to see if any other person has additional questions. Otherwise, maybe we can get any last words from the presenters. Todd, I had seen a comment from you. Do you have anything to add?
No, you guys, this is wonderful, and it's nice to see the advancement of the thinking and the formulation post the annual forum announcement. And I know this has been in the works quite a bit from you guys. With the support of the SEOP, we're moving forward on formalizing that and figuring out how we can cast a wider net. I think this is a great start in getting the poll, so we can see the active participants already and the champions who want to raise their hands and jump into some of the solution groups, as well as come up with new ones. So I just encourage those to spread the word for us to look at simplifying the systems as it goes forward, and to provide that alignment between the Scaling Coalition, which, as I'm looking at the website now, is really coming together nicely, and to double down on really providing these deliverables. I know Johannes's point about measuring the impact and looking at it, and as Lorraine addressed, I think that's a critical way that the scaling community of practice, as it moves forward into this, can start to look at that data, and we can learn from those lessons and continue to scale this program unto itself. So thanks for all of your participation and support.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you to all our three presenters. Thank you for your presentations, but also engaging us through the questions, and to all the participants for all the questions and also engagement during this session. For now, I'll bring this session to a close and hand it over to Anamika for a final thank you and close out. Thank you. Over to you, Anamika.
To all who have joined today, please accept our sincere gratitude for joining this webinar and providing your critical input. That is going to help us in many ways. We are a new forum, and those inputs and suggestions are highly welcomable. Your questions and comments and inputs reflect that you are interested in the coalition, and it is definitely going to help us in many ways. I also take this opportunity to thank the speakers of today's webinar. I begin with Lorraine. Thank you so much, Lorraine, for briefing us on the coalition. Truly in a nutshell, actually, especially what the coalition is and what it is not, while also raising some very pragmatic concerns and challenges for the coalition. That was a good heads up. Thanks to Mark for introducing us about the challenges for the Scaling Coalition and briefing us on today's Scaling Challenges poll as well. It was sharp, precise, and clear. It was indeed very helpful. I think we got more than 50 responses, and that is really commendable. So you could engage participants very effectively. Then coming to Michael, thanks a ton for elaborating on the solution groups, which is, as we know, it's a very crucial aspect of Scaling Coalition, and your inputs were very helpful. Thank you for walking us through the membership and engagement model of the solution group, and also the governance structure of the Scaling Coalition, and also on like who can get involved in the solution group. It was like very welcoming and opening, and that was very helpful. Then special thanks to Gabby for she's the connecting dot, connecting point. She's the sounding board for coordinating, organizing, and managing this webinar in such a phenomenal manner. And thank you also for introducing today's poll. Now I thank my colleague Esther, my colleague and fellow co-chair for the working group on agriculture, rural development, and social enterprise at the Scaling Community of Practices. Thank you, Esther, for managing the question and answer session so efficiently and so effectively, and also for playing a very crucial role in coordinating and organizing this webinar. I also take this opportunity to thank all my colleagues at the Scaling Coalition, representing various forums like CGIAR, FOA, the Gates Foundation, GIZ, the World Trend Group. And special thanks to Johannes and Todd and all other founders of the Scaling Coalition for envisioning this space and more importantly, making this space such a vibrant and promising platform. And I think that is commendable. And finally, thank you again, all participants and speakers for joining this webinar and making this such an intriguing and meaningful interaction. Thanks a ton.